I'm so happy to bring back my friend, Dr. Dan Schneider. He's a prolific author, and every time he writes a new book, I have him on. But I asked him to come on before I even knew that he had a new book coming out. And the backstory is I had done a short video about a month or so ago about guardian demons. Now, perhaps I shouldn't have called them guardian demons, but I was referring to this idea that Satan's minions, they're not going to leave you go, that every single human being's got at least one demon that's trying to follow you, listen to you, know you well and intimately, and manipulate you. Well, Dr. Dan Schneider is the man who I went and got some of that information from. And a lot of people received it well, but a couple of people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous. God wouldn't put a guardian demon. I'm like, no, of course God wouldn't put a guardian demon on you, but Satan, who's sly, will. Anyway, this is how we're going to start this conversation because it was a really good one, Dr. Dan Schneider. Thank you so much for coming on. I always love our conversations.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I'm glad to be back on the show. Thanks for
What are
having me.
your thoughts? You're the one that told me that it's the church fathers actually talked about this topic.
Yeah, particularly the some of the desert fathers and some of the monastic fathers. Before we get into what they have to say, let me start with a doctor of the church, Saint Bonaventure, asked, "Why does God allow demons to afflict us?" And so he gave four answers: to heal, I mean, to punish sin, to rebuke the sinner, to educate us, and to glorify God. And so those are four principal reasons that Saint Ambrose says, I mean, Saint Bonaventure. Saint Ambrose also says that God uses the angels to punish sin in really a threefold movement of purifying, illuminating, and transforming and sanctifying. And so that same three great ways of this interior life, the spiritual life, the way of purification, the way of illumination, the way of transformation or union. And so the angel's task, Saint Ambrose says, is that they work on God's behalf to purify us to in that first phase of conversion and that purification. Let's face it, it's a lifetime. And so God allows this. It's God that allows it. It's not like the demons are out there running wild. It's that God allows it for one of these reasons, principally. And so when the fathers are reflecting on this, it's really to glorify God, to train us, to educate us on spiritual combat, so that we can become true soldiers of Christ, so that we can become holy and ultimately. I mean, let's face it, we were not made for this earth. We were made for heaven.
Right.
And so we've been airdropped, like paratroopers behind enemy lines, and God allows us, He wants us to find our way home. And so the angels are used as instruments of that. And whether those angels are glorified or fallen, the different fathers have different opinions of that. Now we know from tradition that and that each one of us has been assigned a guardian angel. That we know Jesus says, "Do not despise one of these little ones, for they're angels in heaven, constantly look
On
on
the
the
face
face
of
of the heavenly Father." And so the Catechism actually cites that as evidence for our having guardian angels. But um, the a lot of some of the monastic fathers in the early church really kind of deliberated on this, because these are the guys that are doing battle. I mean, people have no idea how the monastic life is truly spiritual combat. I've got a friend who left the active priesthood. He was in a religious order. He left the active with permission and a woman as well, religious order that left with permission to move out of the active life into the contemplative monastic life as hermits. And I met briefly as this hermit friend of mine moved from one state, moved back to his final permanent hermitage. And he told me, he said, yeah, and he's a really intellectual guy. He actually peer reviewed my Liber Christo manual, and they also peer reviewed for me and just gave me some insights on my book on generational curses that's coming out next month. But and so he said, the Evagrius Ponticus writes about the eight evil thoughts, or the eight logismoi. He says, and I've lived as a monk now. I mean, as a hermit for a year, and he says, I got to tell you, it is exactly the way he describes it. And Evagrius was writing in the 300s. Okay, so this is the fruit of the monastic part of the
lifestyle.
development understanding of angels and demons, it's been really negatively influenced A lot of people follow kind of this kind of a Protestant, going back to the Book of Enoch, and it gets picked up again in medieval Judaism and Kabbalic, Judaism, that the angels and demons have two different oranges. That the demons are the byproduct of the Nephilim. They are the byproduct of
Yeah.
the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and had intercourse and made a race of giants. And so that's just not simply our that doesn't mean they're demons. That means Saint Augustine and Saint Chrysostom, John Chrysostom, they spoke about that as well, on how this race of giants, so called, are the men of the earth that militate, the bloodline that militates against the good line, the bloodline of the Messiah of Jesus Christ. Those who call on the name of the Lord, etc. It's a whole complicated development, but nonetheless, the angels and demons are not. It's not like they have two different origins. God creates angels in day two, when it says God separated the light from the darkness. Now, this is what Thomas and Bonaventure and Dionysius and other doctors and great thinkers in the church said, that God separated out and created the angels at this time, those that were obedient and those that were faithful and submitted to God's plan. He revealed himself, his plan of salvation. He revealed themselves in light of that and their task. And those who rejected their task with Lucifer, not say, echo the words of the prophet, non serviam, I will not serve a God that takes a form lower than me. And they now become fallen angels, we call demons. And the glorified angels move to actual higher state, St. Thomas says. So we have the same creation of angels and demons, but you can't understand demons, unless you understand angels. And so God has assigned to each one of us a guardian angel. This we know from tradition. It comes from, I think, the Fourth Lateran Council, etc. That all the angels were created good, and that those fallen angels chose to disobey. And so the fathers really talked about the idea that God allows temptation for us, to draw us into greater vigilance and greater prayer. And so some of the early church fathers and later patristic writers actually said that they imply or suggest that the devil does assign a personal demon to each individual being, for the purpose of tempting, accusing, and spiritual warfare. Just like Bonaventure says, one of those four things, to punish us when we sin, to rebuke us when we are tempted, and to fall into sin, to educate us. And we learn about how to fight the enemy in spiritual combat, and also ultimately to glorify God. We defeat the enemy and we drive him from us and drive him from our family, etc. We bring glory to God. And so here's a couple. Origin of
Well, let me
Alexander.
hold off for a second, because I just want to bring it down to blonde terms here, right? To normal
Okay, like I
folk.
said in the Marine Corps, they said, I'm gonna have to explain it to you in Barney terms.
In
Yeah,
Barney
your
terms.
husband will understand that. We're
He
going to
will
tell your
understand.
husband,
Speak to me like
sweetheart, just
Barney.
explain it to me in Barney terms.
He will
Right.
appreciate that. He's watching, Dan. You get it.
Good, good, good. Go
My
Army.
husband's
Although
dad.
I think the Navy beat the Army this year, unfortunately. But
He's
yeah, good.
Navy.
I
But
know.
so I just want to say, in using that war analogy, again, for the people who had an issue with this, it just makes perfect sense. You are a special forces guy, helicopter pilot. I mean, you did these missions, and your job, correct me if I'm wrong, was to understand the enemy. So you have to follow
Right.
them. You have to try to read the radio transmissions. You have to get as much reconnaissance as you can on the enemy, so that
Yeah.
you knew best how to attack them. You knew where the weak spots were. You knew everything. So again, I'm kind of getting defensive, is that one or two persons who said, "Oh, that's ridiculous," but no, we are the enemies of Satan. So this, you are just falling right into saying, yes, that Satan has to study Dan Schneider. He has to study Christine Bacon, and so he's going to put his minions on each one of us, so that they know how we think. Even though they can't read our thoughts, right? They know what Christine Bacon's likely going to do, because he's been studying me for 61 years.
Yeah, they
You
don't
know what I
have
mean?
they're not omniscient like God, but they're pretty darn good
Intelligent.
actuaries. You know what an actuary is? An
Something to do with
actuary is the
finances.
mathematicians that do mathematical formula for insurance companies. They know that if you have a Labrador Retriever, There's no extra rider or cost of insurance, but if you have a German Shepherd or a Doberman, there's a better chance of a dog bite. They know that girls have a less of that young boys have a
Have
higher
a
chance of
higher
an accident than young
than the
girls, and
girls.
so they have probabilities. That's what an actuary does. So the demon is not omniscient. He only knows what he knows, what's requisite to his mission, and that was shut down at his rejection. The angels receive a deeper infusion of the beatific vision, but the demon knows what he knows, everything knows. He knows it perfectly according to his mission. And so,
Because he also doesn't forget. I mean,
oh no,
there's
it
no
doesn't because
time.
he's pure intellect. He's pure
Correct.
intellect. I've heard Father Ripperger say that the lowest of angels could obliterate the entire universe if God allowed it. That's how much power he infers from St. Thomas and the other writers on the power of and how powerful an angel is. And so we got to understand we're not dealing. I hear people say, "Oh, the angel, the demon, the devil's a punk. I ain't afraid of him." Yeah, well, you better
Well,
be,
you better
brother.
be.
You better
Yeah.
be because I've seen good marriages, good priests, good deacons taken down, obliterated because they underestimated the enemy. So we have again, I was a cavalry, I was a helicopter pilot and a Cav scout, and that's what we did. We scouted the enemy. We knew their weaknesses. We reported back. And, we have an echelon. Just like a military in the angelic realm is it's very ordered and organized according to hierarchies and choirs and missions within that and their unique orientation to the Blessed Trinity. And so they're in battle array, if you will, and they have their Cav scouts, they have their watcher spirits, they have their defensive guardian spirits, they have their primary possessors, they have their skirmishers on the battlefield. Remember when Jesus confronted the Gerasene demoniac, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion, for we are many." Right, and a Roman legion at that time would have around 6,000 legionaries, in addition to cavalry, light infantry skirmishers, etc., and all the whole train behind them of support personnel. And so 6,000, my name is Legion, for we are many. And so this is the way they work. And they probe, they're sappers. If you want to see a good video, there's a news report, Walter Cronkite towards the end of the Vietnam War. But I think might have been color, black and white, that era of television. So Walter Cronkite is doing an expose or a story on the sappers in Vietnam. The sappers were half special forces, Viet Cong special forces, and half combat engineers. And they showed I don't know if he was a defector or a prisoner of war, and he was crawling under the enemy wire, our wire. Their enemy was us, showing him how he can penetrate inside the wire, and that's what sappers are. And so this is kind of analogous to how the demon works. He's constantly looking for weak spots, for places he can broach. And if he can get us to kill ourselves and hurt ourselves and wound our own, he will. I have a good
Yeah.
friend who passed away last year. He was probably, up until last year, the most highly decorated living Vietnam veteran. He had 4 Bronze Stars, 2 Silver Stars, all for valor, and the Vietnamese Medal of Honor. Grew up Amish in Pennsylvania, passed away last year. And his first night in Vietnam, his very first night, he was on a perimeter, just a perimeter watch, CQ as they call it. He's on perimeter watch, and the sapper comes in and he takes the Claymore mine, and they don't see it. He comes in silently. He reverses it, turns it the other way. That Claymore mine says front towards enemy. And so he did it the other way, and then they get out of the way, and then they make a bunch of noise and pretend they're breaching the wire. Somebody clicks it, boom, and that thing blows up into our camp, and several people were killed that his very first night in Vietnam. That's we know in spirit and physical combat, this is what sappers do. This is what Calf Scouts do. This is what we do. We look for spots to breach, spots of weakness. The T-62 tank, which we largely were up against, there were some T-72 tanks that the Republican Guard had, but some of the units largely used a T-62, and it had a big 55-gallon external gas tank on the back of this tank, right? Well, we happen to have rockets and missiles, right? Tow missiles. We were Cobra, so I had tow missiles. The Apaches had Hellfires. What do you think our target was? You blow up that external tank, that's a weak spot. That's a weak spot. If you blow that up, you're going to blow the whole tank
Everything
up.
else.
And so we knew that. We actually have playing cards. I have them in my army box in my garage somewhere. Playing cards identify IFF, identify friend or foe. This is the ZSU-23-4, which is one of the Soviet-made anti-helicopter, anti-aircraft gun. This is the MP4. This is the whatever. All these different. We have to know what the enemy is, what their vulnerabilities are, what their capabilities are. That's just part of combat. And there's no reason for us. It's naive for us to think that that doesn't apply when it comes to spiritual combat.
Yeah, and one I want to touch on one thing you said, and one of the weapons that Satan uses is our, I would say, arrogance or low boundaries, or exactly what that person said is, oh, Satan's just a punk. I think my regular viewers know that I wrote a book called The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage, in which I interviewed the top of the top. I mean, this would be the special forces of marriage. These were those people who really had it going on. And one of my super wives had had an affair. And she said to me, and actually the affair happened after I interviewed them. And she said, I'm super happy with my husband. We're in this book. Everyone sees us as this cute couple. So I thought I was immune to having an affair. And so I let my boundaries down and I got too
Quite the
close.
opposite. Yeah, quite the opposite. Because
Yes,
once she makes that, once she's notified, I mean, noticed and suddenly put on this pedestal, the demon's going to say, if I can flip her, I can bring everybody, I can bring more down. So he's always looking for that
exactly.
platform. He wants to bring, he's not out just for you or me. He's out to separate the couple, create that alienation, create that division. Once he severs them and the two are now separated and not praying together and overlapping their shields, his target is to go up for the children. He's going for the whole marriage. He wants the whole bunch. And the
Yes.
more he can take down, that's why you see when you see some of these Catholic influencers out there, and not just Catholic, but others, they get a huge audience and then they get taken down. And the demon likes that platform. Then he can scandalize as many people as he possibly can. That's his goal. He doesn't want to just snipe and take you out. If you can take more people with you, even better.
I
They
mean,
did this in
we,
Vietnam. The Viet Cong did
yeah,
this. You know what they would do? My friend told me he was there. They would put a shape charge, and because they knew, for example, and if we know that the evil mind of man can come up with this, you think the enemy can, a spiritual enemy can do similar things. If you go walking with your grandkids and on a country walk and there's a Coke can sitting there, what do you do when you get up to the Coke can? What does every American
you
kid
kick
do?
it.
You kick it. So the Viet Cong would take a shape charge and they would put it inside Coke cans and lay them on the paths that they knew that the Americans would be walking down because they
They
knew that
keep
we can't
kicking it.
resist it. Most of our soldiers are coming from rural environments and we just naturally kick cans and that's just what we do. And so they would put it wasn't a charge enough to kill. It was just enough to blow the leg off from the knee down and wound them. But they also knew that the Americans would never leave a soldier wounded or dead behind. That's our code. And so they would let him lay there screaming, begging for help. And as one by one they tried to go help him, they would be already set up in the wood line with snipers to take out as many as he possibly could. Because of wounding one, they can take down the rest.
Wow.
And so we see that same pattern happening in families. We're digressing from the original topic, but you can see
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
just an
but
old
it's
repurposed
important
cavalry scout, and this is what I've seen in spiritual combat again and again and again. The demon plays out these same patterns. One Father Ripperger once asked the demon, "Why do you keep doing the same things to
because they
tempt
work.
humans?" He said, "Because it works. You know,
It's
because it
funny
works."
when I do work with my couples who are standing, for marital reconciliation, and their spouse who's a prodigal is off most of the time having an affair. That's exactly what I say. I said, guys, I know this is extremely painful to you. This is your singular spouse. This is your singular journey. I said, but I got the $10,000, 10,000-foot view. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of couples, and let me tell you this. This is what Satan's going to do because he cannot change. He cannot create. He always repeats the same patterns. And in one sense, Dan, that is very freeing. It's liberating because I'm going, he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And then if you do this, this is what's going to respond, which is why I have my 25 principles of standing. Never respond to hatred and anger with hatred and anger, because here's what Satan's going to do. He can latch on, blah, blah, blah. So that is so right. If we understand how Satan operates, we can then, through by the grace of God, have the upper hand because we know his tactics. So we need
Yeah,
to know his tactics.
yeah, yeah. You got to know, and you got to know your own weaknesses and your own human nature. If you want to begin with spiritual combat, you got to begin with yourself, the guy or the gal in the mirror. You're the biggest enemy. I'm the biggest enemy. Then looking in the mirror, I'm the one that I've got to subdue. St. Paul says, what I want to do, I don't do. What I don't want to do,
Yeah.
I do. Who will deliver me from this body of death? Recognizing your weakness. St. Paul elsewhere says, 3 times I asked the Lord to take this cross from me. He says, my grace is sufficient for you. For what? Power is made perfect in weakness. It's the exact opposite of what we know in the human realm. But God's power is made most perfect in us when we are weak and we are vulnerable. And that's hard. That's hard for
Because we
alphas.
don't like
That's hard for
feeling,
intelligent people. It's hard for stubborn people. It's hard for all of us
yeah,
to be vulnerable. And
yeah.
so, and it's hard to be vulnerable for the work that you're doing with marriage. You
And it's
have to be vulnerable.
more difficult for men to be vulnerable than women.
100% because it goes against so much of the of our genetic our makeup, not just
Right.
culturally, but our interior, who we are as men. It goes
So how
against
does a
it.
man find that balance? I mean, we could even do a whole show on that one day. How does a man find that balance between headship, leadership, being strength, taking care of, and then still being vulnerable? And who are you vulnerable to? But
Love knows no greater than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And the word he used there is agape. We all hear like these sermons on love, 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 right? We've had a generation of love sermons, and most of our preachers don't understand what this means. This word agape is largely unique to Christianity. It means sacrificial love, sacrificial love. And so when Jesus says to Peter, there's another word, there's many words for love. There's
right,
storge,
filio,
which it
storge,
please
right.
me, right? Pizza, Italian pizza pleases me, whatever, enchiladas. But then there's filio, which
Eros,
means
filio is
eros.
brotherly
Eros
love,
is not erotic,
erotic.
it's just sexual, but it's philosophically it's love that sprouts wings, and that's what the eros that a couple initially draws us together, and the two together sprout wings up to the divine. And the opposite of eros is thanatos, it's death, right? And so then, but then you've got filio, which is, the city of brotherly love,
Right.
Philadelphia. So filio is it's fond affection. I
Yeah.
really, really like you. I respect you, and then agape. Agape is the love that sacrifices. And so Jesus says to Peter at the Sea of Tiberias, "Do you love me with a love that sacrifices?" And Peter says, I
I
love you,
filio you.
but I filio you. And does
Yeah.
it another time. Do you love me? Guard my lambs, tend my sheep. And Peter can only at this point can only say, I filio you. I really, really, really like you, Jesus.
I
I
filio
really
you
like
a
you.
lot.
I like you a lot. You know what I mean? A lot. Um, it's like Pee Wee Herman, right? I like you. I like you, Dottie, right? So he's given the Pee Wee Herman. I like you, Jesus. I like you. And then Jesus goes to his level and says, Do you filio me? Yes, I filio you. And then what does he say?
When you were younger,
When you were younger,
you
you were,
clothed yourself and you,
but he was referring to the type of death that Peter would
right.
suffer. And so we see embedded in that, I'm going to get back to your question about
Yeah.
men.
You're
Embedded
going
in
to
that,
agape me eventually.
Benedict, Saint Pope Benedict gave several homilies, 3 homilies in the year of the priest on the threefold munera of the office of priest. And so he likens the governance, the munus regendi, the office of ruling for the priest. He brings it back to this conversation with Peter, the first pope, with the Lord. And he says, and basically he alludes to the two ends of the office of the headship of the church, which is also the office of the priest, which is to tend to my sheep, feed my lambs, to guard and to protect. That's the role of anyone who has an office, has the role to guard and to protect. And this word agape shows up again in St. Paul's language and writings, and he tells the women, you will learn agape through childbearing. Wow, how can that be? And you know this to be true. There's something about a woman's nature that is transformed. My wife was different. Not just the moment she conceived and we realized,
You're pregnant,
oh
right?
my gosh, oh my
The
gosh,
baby
breathe,
appears.
But when that child was born, she something instinctively took over, and she could sacrifice, she could give without complaint. And most women are just like that. They can give and suffer in a way
Yeah,
that
I
a
don't
man
need
cannot,
food. I'll give it to you. You have the
right?
food.
I mean, she'll be up all night, go to work the next day and not complain. I get up and pee in the middle of the night. If I don't fall back asleep in 5 minutes, the next day I'm like,
You're
oh my
whiny.
gosh, I was up all night. Because men, you know what I mean? Women, it comes more naturally to them, but men have to make that decision. And so when you fast forward another place, St. Paul talks about agape in light of men, to answer your question, wives be subordinate to your husbands. And when we read that at mass, the guys are always like, get
Yeah,
on the elbow.
yeah.
Come on, baby. Listen to that guy. He's preaching
Like,
it.
just keep
That's the
listening, honey. Your
Bible.
turn's coming
That's
next.
the Bible. Exactly. But most guys, they don't want to hear the net. But men, love your wives. And that word, by the way, to be subordinate, to subordinatio, it just means to be ordered under. Literally, it's a military term. And Paul's getting ready to talk about military armaments that he sees in Ephesus, which is an occupied city, occupied by Roman legionaries. And he's describing their garb their uniforms, right? So he's leading up to spiritual combat. And he says, husbands. So that word to be subordinate literally means to be ordered under, to be under the protection of, under the protection of. Tasso is the Greek, ordinatio is the Latin, the Greek word tasso. It means battle array. So when I flew in Iraq, there was the Iraq tanks completely in battle array. There's our tanks in battle array. That's what tasso is. And to be ordered under means to find your place within that battle for your protection and your provision. We weren't mercenaries. We fought as part of a larger unit, and and so that's the language he's evoking. And what does it mean to be under upotasso, to be subordinatio? That the man that has the office of head of household is to provide and to protect. That same two things that he told Peter. You are to hold up that shield and take your sword and you stand and defend with your wife and your children behind you. And how do you do that? Going back to your question, why is this hard for men? Because men are soft. Men have a disordered understanding of what it means to be a man today. And Jesus shows us what it means. Love has no greater than this, to give one's life for one's friends. And so you die as Christ, as St. Paul says, as Christ gave himself over for the church, his bride, you do the same. And so it's in that death to self, the offering of oneself. This is how men perfect their love for their spouses. And they have to weed out all the selfishness, all the softness. We see these guys, and I don't want to be critical. I'm getting old and losing my filter. But these guys, they got the cool little perfect beards, and they've got their cigars and their bourbon. And you know what I mean? They got their cool t-shirt,
Yeah.
Valhalla, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? They can't take a punch. They've never been punched in the face in their life. And they think externally, the external things, what makes you a man. What makes you a man is being conformed to Christ and being able to die like a warrior, like he did for his bride.
Mm. Man,
Sorry,
it's
there's a
like,
little riff on
amen.
this.
Preach it, brother.
Yeah, I'm
Preach
not
it.
I'm not used to preaching, so we'll go back to
But that's,
theology.
in agape being sacrificial love, sacrifice, the two words, I think it's Latin, sacra and ficia, mean to make holy,
To
to
make
make
holy.
holy. And you are to be
Yeah.
holy before God. And so, yeah,
And
sacrifice
set
being to
apart,
make you
and that
holy.
word holy, we'll get into that if you want to get into ritual, we can. But the word to mean to be holy, and we still have to go back to the demons assigned to us. But to be holy means to be set apart. And
Yes.
Paul echoes Genesis, the father, a man shall leave his father and mother, be
And
joined
cling
to
to
his
his
wife,
wife.
and
And
the two become
that's one.
one. And that is the essence of the authority each person, the husband and wife, have over each other's bodies, and why that's such a violation. Adultery is such a violation of that, because you're giving something that no one else except for that person has a right to. You
Yeah.
see, you're giving something of if you're a man, you have an affair, you're giving something that belongs rightly to only one person, right?
Well,
And so that word
go
to
ahead.
leave,
Yeah.
cleave, and become one, right? To leave, cleave, and become one, you know. And
It's
whenever I see, to cleave together and the two become one. And whenever I see, a guy, again, being a gentleman, we've lost this. Whenever I see a guy opening up a car door for a woman, I always say it's either a new car or a new woman, right? We've lost it. We need to get back to cleaving and becoming one. Anyway,
I'm gonna divert from the question I was gonna ask, and I'm gonna put you on the spot, and you might not like me for asking this, but I'm gonna just go there and be super personal. Where does Dan Schneider struggle most with vulnerability? Because you're like a man's man. It's
yeah, no, you sound
examples
like my
work.
wife, because she's like, "Oh, you're afraid to be vulnerable. You're afraid to be vulnerable." So So if I can't tell her, I guess I can't tell you. No, I think we all have them. I think these are the deeper things. I'd have to think. I mean, there's obviously vulnerabilities. We all have them.
Yeah. Yeah. And vulnerabilities, if you're in the military, is sharing that thing that puts you at
And what
risk
does
of what?
vulnera mean?
I don't
That's a Latin
know.
word for wound.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. So being vulnerable is,
inta
I
tua
use this.
vulnera abscondame, and the Anima Christi, right? Inside of your wound,
Oh,
hide me. You know.
here's what I talk about in my Barney language. Thank you for that. So you know your spouse hands you a gift, right? And here's what I'm gonna you can use this with your wife, but let's just say your greatest fear is being when you were a child, you were picked on for being fat, right? So you get married and then you tell your wife, out of pure vulnerability, I hated it when they called me fat. It just really bothered me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what your spouse has done is they've just handed you this gift. Here is a piece of me. I am terrified because it hurts so badly. So now, as a spouse, I have a choice. I can hold this gift, and whenever anything happens or you're having a fight, you treasure that because I thought, no, that's a piece of my spouse that I need to protect. Now, this is even wives to husbands, right? But definitely husbands to wives as well. But the reason vulnerability is so hard is let's just say my husband and I are having a fight and I've got this gift that he shared with me in a moment of vulnerability. And then maybe he just like says something snotty and I go, you fat pig. You seen
Boom.
that? Yeah.
And you
And
know what? A
so,
woman can gut
oh, she can
her
do it.
husband. Most women have no idea. Maybe
I
they do.
know.
They
I don't
just
think
with,
we really know it intellectually, but I think we know it instinctively. And as we
yeah,
mature, we're like, I need to
yeah,
not do
yeah.
that because that's vicious. But that's why vulnerability is so hard. It's
And it's
showing to
hard.
someone who could
Yeah.
potentially be your enemy or potentially be your greatest ally. And life has shown us
Hmm.
that I don't exactly know. Like I married you and I think I can trust you, but you have hurt me in the past. So I don't really
Yeah.
want to know. And so if you look at infidelity, someone has cheated on me. I don't want to be vulnerable with you, and reconciling could be really, really painful. So I'd rather protect myself than be vulnerable with you. And so
Yeah.
therein is the
That's hard.
constant struggle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all have them. I think getting real, getting real with those, especially for men, getting real with this happened to me or that happened to me or my, when, I was just on Sean Ryan. Um,
Yeah, you military guys, you're not going to share
yeah, a
with
lot
us
of
the
he does a lot
brains
of
that you
military
saw
guys.
splattered on the sidewalk because then it's going to bring back this pain to you.
Yeah,
And you don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
share anybody
So
that you cried when you saw such and such.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Because we don't, you know what I mean? It's just part of that military. It's like, hey, man, you just suck it up and drive on. You know what I mean? That's it. But he made a comment to me before the interview. We were talking, and he said, he said, I interview a lot of guys, and most of the men I interview are not just ex-military, but deep operators.
Yeah.
I said, I bet you 50% of the men that have been on my show, he said. Now he's had, I think this last episode, I was episode 266. So he's pushing 300. Of all the men, he said 50% of them were sexually molested as a child.
Of the ones in special forces
That he has
or that
interviewed
he's
in his show. He told me
interviewed.
that. So that's something, that's something. And so it shows you um, if the demon can get to a child specifically in
And
molestation,
affecting the future and the
it's
family and the
it, it
life
you,
and the marriage.
yeah, you can distort all of that. You can distort his understanding as a man. You can distort his understanding of sex. You can distort, and you can just set him on a bad course. Now, that doesn't mean it's over. That's why Maria Goretti, I put her as
Oh, she's
the model in
amazing.
my book. One of the models for the difference between trauma and violence. And I break it out. You're the psychologist. I don't want to go step into on your toes, but trauma, I link it to something subjective. It's your response to something. Violence is objective. Christ suffered violence, but was not traumatized. He surrendered to the will of the Father completely. So finding even in our suffering the will of the Father, a hard thing. Help me to trust you, Father, with the trust of Jesus. That's a vulnerable trust. That
it,
one,
it
that was
is.
given to you by the Hermitess that I've told you about. And she's like, then ask Jesus or Jesus, help me to trust the Father with the trust of Jesus.
Hmm.
Yeah, because the demon's going to lie to you. That's what he does. If you go down this route, it's over.
I'm glad you segued right back into because that's exactly it. Satan does not want you to be vulnerable because you're vulnerable and you can get smashed. But if you are vulnerable, it produces the greatest fruit. I mean, Jesus did that. He's physically naked. You know, his body
Yeah.
was naked. But he exposed everything, and you can laugh at him or you can love him.
Yeah.
And we as humans, we've got Satan always saying, laugh at him, go get him, don't because he doesn't want us to be vulnerable. I want to take this conversation kind of into the book that's coming out because you and I clearly can talk for hours. This is a great subject. So,
Oh, do
what
you want to
about
go
the
over before that? Do you want to go over the demons aside and what attracts, or you want to?
take it there? I was because eventually we're going to get to the generations because when these people get married, I had said to you before we went on the air, my mom was pregnant when she got married. I was pregnant when I got married. My daughter was pregnant when she got married. And that's definitely seemingly a generational curse or a demon that's like putting the same things in our
Yeah,
heads
yeah.
or whatever. But
All right,
yes, I'd like to.
this sets it up actually.
Okay, good.
Let's sets it up. Okay, so you had asked me, and so about not really. You can't really call them guardian demons because they're anti-guardian demons. They're not guarding us; they're attacking
Right.
us. Okay, but
Okay.
everything the demon does is the opposite. I'm going to just give you a couple of quotes so you can kind of get a mind of what the early church fathers. Origen, he was not a saint, but he was one of the greatest minds of his age, and still influential. There are certain invisible enemies who strive to prevent our advance towards better things. Each one of us has, as it were, a particular enemy assigned to him. Okay. He elaborates in this work that the demon tempts people according to their weaknesses, citing Job and Jesus as models. So we see the demon is assigned to us to exploit and the one that what attracts him to us, it's kind of like unto like. Our weakness is what attracts him. St. Anthony the Great, great desert father, as told by St. Athanasius. The devil appoints certain demons to each soul who watch over it from birth and seek to lead it astray. Okay, so he's saying that it acts like a guardian, but in the opposite. Instead of guarding to light, to guard, to rule and guide, it would be instead of light, darkness. Instead of guarding, attacking, and instead of ruling over us, placing us in submission, enslavement, and instead of guiding us, of course, leading us
Misguiding us.
astray,
Right.
misguiding us. Evagrius Ponticus, he was a Eastern monk, Eastern father. He's the one that gave us the eight evil thoughts. Okay. The devil assigns to each of us a demon who is particularly skilled in tempting us according to our predominant passion. Okay. That's an interesting one. And it's going to tie in to when we get to the concept of a generational spirit, okay, or curse. Okay. John Cassian, St. John Cassian, who heavily influenced Western monasticism, he immigrated from the East to the West. And Saint Benedict will pick up a lot of his some of the stuff of his rule and his the fourfold method of reading the scriptures, etc. The devil distributes to his ministers so that each individual there is allotted a particular demon who is acquainted with his special weaknesses. So you see that it's the weaknesses that attracts us, and so it ties back into what Bonaventure said that God allows the demon. Now they're not doing it like because without God knowing it, they're allowed by God. Everything the angels and fallen angels do is allowed by God for our sanctification, ultimately to get us to heaven. And so God allows that. And one of the things Bonaventure says is that we would to educate us and to glorify God. We have this certain weakness, and whether you inherited it, through imitation, and you saw your parents live it, and we'll get into that next. But we have this weakness that the demon will exploit, just like the 55-gallon gas drum on the back of the
Yeah. Yeah.
T-62 tank. Saint Augustine um, uses he says that demons are like adversaries who besiege individuals personally. And so he does that. St. Augustine takes it to the next level because now you're into the 400s. He takes it to the next level and he starts talking about what attracts the demon to us. And he says that he this is one of the translations from De Doctrina. This is how the demons come to have different effects on different people. according to their particular thoughts and fancies. Spirits who wish to deceive someone devise appropriate signs for each individual to match those in which they see him caught up through his speculations and the conventions that he accepts. Meaning, whatever your conventions are, he works on that. Whatever whatever you've accepted in your own imagination, your own background, your own formation.
Give me an
And
example of a convention.
well, he gives an example of, for example, the letter beta. To a Greek, a beta is second in a row or sequence, a beta male, a beta
Right.
test, etc. Beta to a Latin person, a Roman, a Latin speaker, is a vegetable, purple vegetable. It's where we get the word beet. And so we have different conventions, and he uses what's in the imagination, and he uses that against us. All right, he uses that against us. And so we have. I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine was from South Africa. He was, and so he was university and he was doing a pre-math test, right? Just right off the boat from South Africa. And he's sitting down next to this really nice, attractive young co-ed. Halfway through the math exam, he leans over to the young woman and says, "Excuse me, do you have a rubber?" And she was like, "Oh," she gets up and tells the professor and storms out of the
Get
room.
me away from this guy.
Get me away from this creeper. So the professor or administrator comes over and goes, "What did you say to her?" He goes, well, I just made a mistake and I don't have a rubber on my pencil. And so I need to erase it because I wanted to redo this problem. So I need a rubber. In South Africa, a rubber is an eraser. It's what's on the back of your pencil, you know? So different words have different connotations. And that's a really good example to show how the demon works on that and he uses that, you know? Um, I'll give and he has
So think
access
if you
to
have a family that's got eating. I mean, let's just take it to like real easy eating habit, gluttony. So there's always sugar around, there's always candy, your family's overweight, so you're just more inclined towards that, maybe perhaps even through your physical DNA, but then also through, hey, the family, whenever there's a celebration, we always have three cakes and we always have, and just like another family, like I have a family member, not my family, meaning my husband, me, and our children, we don't have to worry about alcoholism. But I have another
sure.
part of my family where that's all the kids think about, but that's all the dad thinks about. And so that's kind of similar to the conventions. Yes, no. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a
it is. And he breaks it down, Augustine does. He said these omens, meaning these signs, because really Augustine is where we have the first real Christian understanding of what's called semiotics, how symbols take on greater meaning, right? That it's not just symbol, that there's a greater signification in something that is symbolized. This is why the saints, for example, have distinct symbols. You see Saint Joseph, and there's always the lilies of purity. Who was the deacon that was cooked alive on the rocks?
well, St. Lawrence.
Saint
Yeah.
Lawrence, and each of the saints have these symbols signify something else, and so these symbols have been arranged, and so the enemy he has access to our memories and our imagination, which is tied to the emotion. So this is the pre-thought that we go through, what Thomas would call pre-intellection, the early movements in the memory and the imagination that helps us form our cogitation and intellectual thoughts. Okay, but Saint Augustine said there's three things that attracts the demon. Okay, that makes him really manipulate, and that is what he calls a hurtful curiosity, a torturing anxiety, and a deadly slavery. So this hurtful curiosity, meaning being too curious about things that really have nothing to do with you. Even you can have a good curiosity, a healthy studiosity towards learning about spiritual combat, or you can have a very unhealthy curiosity, and that can attract the demon. You can have an unhealthy curiosity towards charismatic gifts. By the way, you can have this unhealthy curiosity towards something that can be special, right? That can attract the enemy to you, right? There's the old saying, if you look for the devil, he will find you, you know.
Mm.
So Bonaventure says, he's talking to religious sisters here, if you wish to know yourself better, you must Reflect to see if in you there thrives a disordered desire or concupiscence for pleasure, curiosity, or vanity. Surely the disordered desire of curiosity thrives in the servant of God when she desires to know the occult, when she yearns to see the beautiful, and when she wants to possess the rare. And so that is very important for us to be content, with what God has given us in our own state in life. Second, he calls this torturing anxiety. This is high inconstancy, this high emotionality that attracts the demon to us. When this is why we talk with families, that are, one of the spouses is going through some kind of diabolic affliction. We tell them you cannot ever fight in front of the children. Because if you do, the demon's going to walk right up, stand behind them, whisper in their ear, this is not safe. Your home is not safe. It's safer out here. And I'll send somebody to you that will make you feel safe. And we see this in the pattern behaviors, right? Um, and children suddenly looking elsewhere to find their safety because they don't feel safe at home. So it's that. I'll give you another example is I was at the Adoration Chapel a while back, about a year ago, and I was just praying. Again, my imagination and memory is different than yours, right?
Right.
And your experiences are far different than mine. And we're all different. They're all unique. And this comes back to what Evagrius, Origen, in the early church, some of the early desert fathers talk about this specific dialed in temptation for you because the demon has that capacity. He knows our weaknesses. And so I was just sitting there at adoration. It was a couple, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a couple of little church ladies there, and me, and all of a sudden I hear air raid sirens. I mean, like the ones I heard in Iraq, right?
Mm.
Or in Saudi Arabia, getting ready to go to Iraq and specifically. And at that time, I was back in the rear at this air base, and we had incoming and the sirens went off and they come over the loudspeaker. This is not a drill. Go to MOP 4, which is the full chemical.
Yeah.
We have inbound scuds on their way. Go to MOP 4 immediately. Right. So that's in my memory, in my experience. And so I hear this air raid siren go off and I was there, man. It was 1990 all over again. Or 19, I was there.
Yeah.
And I started looking around and I was like, all right, I'm gonna put the two ladies in the bathroom. I'm gonna move a chair, move the desk in front of it. I'm gonna go out to I got a weapon in my truck. I'm gonna go out and get my handgun. I had all these crazy thoughts going through my head in a flash. And then I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I'm sitting here at the church. There's not an air raid. So I started listening. And it was just the church ladies vacuuming. But the pitch of the vacuum cleaner in my hearing, which is not
Matched
as
the one of your
good
memory.
because of my own experiences and helicopters and these other things, my hearing isn't great. In my hearing and the linking of that hearing to the memory, I was there. It's just an instant, just for an instant. But the demon can work those things. Now, I just like, oh yeah. And I kind of laughed at myself and sorry, Lord. And I was like, no, Lord, thanks for letting me have that experience back then and now. And thank you. And I pray for all the men and women who are downrange right now. And so I just turned it into prayer. But somebody else could have had that experience. And if they haven't dealt with that experience and now integrated all their
Spiral. Right.
it goes, and then next thing you know, the demon draws you into a lower emotional state. And in that low emotional state, you're now making decisions not out of the higher faculty of the intellect, but out of the emotions and the
Mm.
instincts. And when you start doing
Passions.
that,
Yeah.
that's when you're manipulated. That's and he doesn't care. He doesn't care what you beat yourself up with.
My gosh, that is brilliant because that's one of the A, I teach that in anger management. B, I teach it with my couples. This is what people need to hear. If they gather anything from the show in simple language, is that your thoughts have to be taken captive. Your thoughts do control it. And so many times you get people that are just letting their thoughts go all over the place and they act as if they don't have control over that. One of the things I do in anger management is there's a segment we do on road rage. And I give the scenario, Dan, you're driving down the road, you're in a great mood, you're listening to your favorite music. You had a great day, looking forward to going home to your wife, your kids in the back seat for whatever reason. Anyway, and then out of the blue, this guy passes you on the left, or on the right, which is illegal, speeds in front of you, slams on the brakes, causing you to slam on your brakes, and then he has the nerve to flip you the bird, right? And so then I go through my class and I specifically ask all 30 students one at a time, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And one guy will say, oh, no one does that to me. I am going after that guy. I'll follow him into the parking lot. Another person might say, I'm just flipping him the bird back. Another person will say, I'm blowing him off. I don't need to worry about him. So, but then I say, well, what caused it? And they say, well, the guy who did that, the guy who cut me off, said, no, because if the guy who cut you off caused it, all 30 of you would have responded the same way. This is called Albert Ellis's theory of emotional arousal, right? So the activating event, you cannot ever change the activating event. You cannot change the fact that that cut you off on the road. You could not change the fact that that siren happened while you're in church. We can't change the activating event.
Just our response.
Right. But a lot of people go, well, the consequences are, well, I cut him off back, or I flipped in the bird, or I have one guy, Norfolk Naval Base here, so be careful if you're he's like, I pull my gun out and I'm going after him. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my neighborhood. I need to be careful because those guys are on the road, right?
What kind of car
So
do you
the
drive?
ABC, right?
Noted. Yeah.
The ABC theory, activating event cannot be changed. We always look at our consequences, which is the C. What's in the middle? The B, the beliefs about that event. If I go into that event believing he's a freaking idiot and I do not get disrespected, then my consequent actions will be based on those beliefs. If I go into it believing, you know what, he's not worth my energy, or you know what, maybe he's having a bad day, maybe he's a good person having a bad day, then my consequent actions will be different. And I just want to say one more thing because this is so important while I'm talking about this. Too many people look at this activating event as if it has to be good. I have two different situations, two women right here, two couples in my area whose 18-year-old daughter was killed in a car accident. Of course, I'm not going to say their names out loud, but let's just say the first one, Maria Samuelson, right? She was killed. I saw her parents in church behind me a week later, and they had such peace in their face. And I'm like, aren't you Maria Samuelson's parents? They go, yes, but you know what? She's in a better place, and we're going to grieve, but we're glad she doesn't have to live in this world, right? And then there's this other girl, years later, their 18-year-old daughter was killed in a car accident. So the activating event is the killed in a car accident. There's no human that's going to walk this planet and ever say that was a good thing, right? We all agree it's a bad thing. But then the second set of parents, let's say that girl's name was Kathy Smith, right? So Kathy's parents ended up suing the company who drove the vehicle that killed their daughter, and they ended up getting angry at everyone. They ended up divorcing each other. They stopped believing in God and all these things. Now, I've never lost a child, so I'm not going to judge either one of them. But what I am saying is, what you said is we have to take captive our thoughts, because both of them lost a child. This family is at peace. This family is at chaos, and it all has to do with the beliefs in their mind. And I mean, that again, you can take all that, Dan. I know you're brilliant. You're going to take it right back to the demonic and how he is trying to control those thoughts in
Yeah,
our minds.
yeah.
I'm
A
done.
couple of things. One is I use the phrase in the book, custody of the imagination. Most men that are worth their salt and struggled against the temptation to impurity had to learn custody of the eyes, right? It's even harder today in today's overly
Yeah,
sexualized.
because all the girls are walking around naked,
Yeah,
practically.
it's very difficult, but still you got to learn custody of the eyes, and so it lead us not into temptation, right? So custody of the imagination is similar. You have to watch what allows into the imagination. Um, One of the things that and what are you familiar with the imprecatory psalms? They've been kind of washed out of our in the new liturgy of the hours, but these are psalms written by David, and David was a man. He was a warrior. He was a man after God's own heart. He wasn't a saint. He had his own struggles, but he was a man after God's own heart. And so David wrote in one of the Psalms, "May God crush the teeth of my enemies. May he break their teeth." Right? And another one, "May God crush the skulls of the babies of my enemies. May he crush them with the rock." And we're like, oh, this is really harsh language, right? But how did the church fathers deal with this? This is where the tradition of allegory. This is our understanding both of typology, but also allegory. Allegoresis means to speak other. And so, in light of Christ, through the incarnation and the fullness of revelation and the person of Jesus Christ in the church, we now begin to see, oh, okay, in the monastic rumination, who is my enemy? Oh, just go down the list. Greed, lust, and pride, anger, all these things are our enemies. And what are my enemies when they're little, when they're babies? The first stirrings of these movements. The first time we start getting that rise of anger, if you let that anger rise into and get to his full stature, you're going to face another Goliath. You're going to face a giant. You got to catch him. You got to catch that movement when it's early. This is what spiritual maturity partly is, catching these movements early before, because once you let that emotion get full flush, you're in big trouble. Now you got a full home battle on your hands.
Because it's
But
got
how do
you
you,
captive.
right? How do you stop it? This is taking thoughts captive. How do you stop it? David says, may it crush their skulls with the rock. 1 Corinthians 10, and the rock was Christ. Rock is a name for God. God is my rock, my savior.
Mhm.
God is my armor bearer, right? God is my rock. And so, and
So
so
if I want
crushing
my
it.
skull crushed with the rock, I want the Christ to
No,
come
crush
in
the
and
skulls of the babies of my enemies. That's what
yeah.
David said. And it's harsh, but he meant that. I mean, he was a warrior and he was hacked off when he wrote this. And so, but the fathers in the received tradition of the church seen this spiritually. The babies of my enemies are the vices. When they're still in their initial stirrings. How do we crush them? With the rock. Who is the rock? Christ. Lord, help me with this. Interjecting, stopping in the middle of this event, the controlling event, right? Stopping in the middle of that and bringing Christ, making Christ present. Lord, help me. Or Lord, bless this person who cut me off. Lord, I'm feeling anger right now. The judo prayer. I started learning judo a year ago because I really want to try to understand bodily spiritual combat from this perspective. But here's the judo prayer. Lord, I'm experiencing X, anger,
Lust.
desolation.
Yeah.
You insert yours, right? Physical pain, back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, neck pain, headache. Um, if this is not from you and is diabolic in its source, I ask you to take it away with it. I ask you, no, if this is not from you and is diabolic in source, I ask you to return it to its source with a tenfold blessing. But if you want me to carry this cross, I willfully accept it. I ask for the grace to carry it, and I offer it up for. And if you offer
Name
it
it.
up for the person that hurt you, the person that abused you, the person that abandoned you, the child that needs special prayers right now, you're learning to use your body, as St. Paul says, a living sacrifice. You're now offering, holy and pleasing to God. Make your bodies a living sacrifice. Be transformed by renewal of your mind, right? Romans 12. So you're now using your body, you're using your body as a weapon, which Christ did. His body became the weapon that
Yeah.
defeated the enemy.
I
And one
mean,
last thing. Now you understand. I forget. I quoted her in the Liber Christo book, but I forget her name escapes me. But she there's a modern psychology phrase called if you can name it, you can tame it.
yeah.
Right? Meaning talking about control the emotions. Remember, Augustine said one of the three things that attracts a demon to us is torturing anxiety, which is a high emotionality, this up and down emotions. If you can name that emotion, you can tame it. But what's driving oftentimes that emotion? The demon that's behind driving the emotions, the demon that's fueling the vice behind the emotion, the physical or the spiritual
Mhm.
vice that's behind the emotion. But you capture the emotion, you take that captive, right, by the rock, crushing it on the rock that is Christ. But if you can name it, you can tame it. If you can't name it, you're just going to you're fighting in the dark. You got
That's
to be
why
able to.
Satan likes to see the things that really got you set off last time, and then he's going to go out of his way to
He's
continue to
going to keep
bring it
hitting it.
to you.
He's going to
And
keep hitting it.
naming it is so important because again and you know this more than I do. I only got it from the books that I read, but sending men to combat, if they don't know what their enemy looks like, they're like, is this really worth fighting this war? Like, i.e. the war on terror. Well, what the heck is terror? What does it look like? So once
Yeah.
they're able to say, well, the terror is this, or it's Hamas, or it's ISIS, or
Yeah.
it's people cutting off babies'
Yep.
heads, and so once you're able to name it, then and I do that with my couples, and I say, look, here's the thing, because usually your spouse leaves you and they all deny the fact they're having an affair, even though I'll say, okay, this is a sign of an affair, that's a sign, that's a sign. And I said, now this may not sound good to you, but I'm going to tell you this. Many times it's preferable that your spouse left for another man or another woman. And they're like, why? I said, because right now they're blaming it on inconsequential things that really aren't true. Like, well, it's because you were controlling, or well, it's because you were this or that. And then the person doesn't really, okay, I'll stop being controlling. How do I, and that's really not what the enemy looks like. I said, now if you find out, and I have a method for this to have them go on a fast, and then we got to find out. Let's have God reveal to us, not out of curiosity, as you said, but show me the information that I need to know. And find out if in fact your spouse is having an affair. Now, if it is, then we go back to what you and I said about an hour ago, is that, okay, now we know what the enemy looks like. Let me tell you Satan's patterns. Let me tell you what he's going to do. He's going to say that they never loved you. He's going to say that this person makes him closer to God. They're going to say that this person, blah, blah, blah. And
Right.
that's why it's so important to be able to name it, because I said, now you know what the enemy looks like. Now I'll give you
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
weapons to fight that type of enemy other than this abstract enemy. And you're just like, I want my wife back. I want my husband back. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't know what tools to use because you don't know what your enemy looks like.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's I like to quote Chesty Puller, the famous Marine general, or
Mhm.
he's a major. We're surrounded. That simplifies the problem. No matter what direction we shoot, we hit one of the
We're going to hit
enemies.
somebody.
We're going to hit somebody. But the thing is, you got to hit. You can't just shoot it on fully auto. You got to pick one. You got to start working on that one thing. And this is part of the importance of examination of conscience, communicating first with yourself, recognizing I'm the problem. I'm the enemy. I got to work on me. That famous uh, what was it called? It was a literary contest by a newspaper, and J.K. Chesterton, the great literary genius, submitted an article to win this contest in the local newspaper, and the question was so many word essay: What's wrong with the world? And G.K. Chesterton, genius, Catholic mind, literary,
Genius. Yeah.
genius. He says, "What's wrong with the world? I
You
am.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, I am." So recognizing that, where does spiritual combat begin? It begins with me doing battle with what? The enemy, and crushing them with the skulls, with crush their skulls while they're still little with the rock who is Christ, being conformed to Christ. And the one thing that does not compute in the diabolic matrix is the offering of the self. What we have in common, the fallen human and the fallen angel, is the inability to sacrifice. Ultimately, what it really comes down to, that when an angel refused uh, um, God and his plan of salvation and his role in that, it was a refusal to lower himself. I don't want to you want me to be a guardian angel to Christine Bacon? Can you at least give me a region?
Yeah.
Can I at least have the state of, I don't know,
Can I at
Florida?
least have the Queen of Sheba?
Can
Something.
I have a queen? Can I have a
The
governor?
Queen.
I don't,
Some podcaster.
I want to be in charge of something bigger. See, so the essence of non-servium, I will not serve a God that takes a form lower than me. It's an inability to serve and the inability to serve, inability to yield. Benedict the 16th cited Anthony of the Desert, who had a vision of Satan. And he said what struck Anthony the most was not just how horrendous and ugly he was, but that he had no knees. And that Anthony
I
concluded the
can't
essence of the
stand.
diabolic is the inability to yield. And so when we have that same stiffness, that same inability to yield, one inability to sacrifice, to offer ourselves, that's where we're most like the demon. That's what we have most in common with him. And so when we do, the diabolic matrix just goes, this doesn't compute. I mean, I understand intellectually perfectly why it makes sense intellectually, but this goes against every ounce of my fallen DNA, offering oneself to another. But that's the essence of spiritual combat. You know, that's people don't like this. They want a special prayer. If I do this prayer, then I'll break it. But Saint Cyprian, 300 AD, doctor or bishop, I'm not sure if he's a doctor of the church, Cyprian of Carthage, um, says under time of intense persecution, he said, "Let us give ourselves unceasingly to vigils, fastings, and prayers in common. These are our ancient weapons. These are our spiritual armaments for the spiritual battle." Wow. You mean it isn't the secret prayer? It isn't calling over this person who's got the special charism for this? No. Vigils, spending time alone before God, praying from the heart of the church, praying in scripture, praying with the liturgy of the hours, praying the devotions, right? Fasting. Jesus himself said, this type with a possessed child, a
Only then.
possessed child. This type can only come out through prayer and fasting, and then prayers in common. So so having our own personal vigilance in prayer and going to vigils and doing other things, fasting, offering your body as a living sacrifice. Jesus didn't say if you decide to fast and it's good for your spirituality, you know, then no, it's when you fast. When they take the bridegroom away, then you will fast. And then, which is why we fast on Fridays and don't eat meat on Fridays in the tradition of the church. And then finally, prayers in common. Praying together is very important, whether as a community or as a couple, as a family.
You have said so much, and I'm sitting here pondering, going, I don't want to rush through the generational uh curses. Let's just do a separate show for that because
I
you
think
have
so.
given us,
That's big because this is the foundation that you build. If you don't understand this
yes,
section, then you're going to fall into all sorts of Arian understandings of what a curse is, what a blessing is, how is generational, what is this type of curse versus Abramovich curses versus Freemasonic
right.
curses. How
And
is this?
we,
So yeah, I fleshed some of that out, and I focus on the generational aspect,
yeah,
meaning this will be the teaser. We do generational as in the sense of inherited and not
by choice or
by no, not generated in terms of being produced. It's like inherited wealth. Like if we were Kardashians that inherited wealth, we wouldn't have to slug it out doing what we're doing, right? So
yeah,
so so it's an inheritance that falls through the family line, and all the things we talked about, specific demons assigned to persons, specific demons now have been attracted or assigned to families for one of these reasons, to clean out certain defects in the family lines. And so God is calling someone in the family to be Christ and to suffer for that, to break this hold it has on the family, to punish the sin, to rebuke a sinner, to educate us, and ultimately to bring glory to God. All things that God allows the demons or the angels, whether fallen or glorified, to do are to ultimately remove the obstacles that keep us from being united with God. The demon is just the instrument of our salvation, our sanctification. And so going back to the second century, St. Irenaeus talked about the condescension of God, the sum catapatis, the ago, or it's a going down into, that God lowers himself. We hear the word condescensio in Latin.
yeah.
He lowers himself to where we are, but it doesn't stop there. The following movement is the anabasis, this going upward to raise us up to where he is. So he lowers himself to where we are to raise us up to where he is. This quagmire on the bottom, when he lowers himself to here, there's things that need to be removed before we can go upward. And so that's the task of the angels, to help to punish, or to what is it, to purify, to illumine, and ultimately to transform us to share in divine life. That's what the angels are constantly working on us.
And so I just want to make sure we're in agreement. We need to do a whole hour show just on
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so this one, I want to tie this one up for my viewers here. It's we need to understand that demons do exist. And I say this because I may have told you this before. I went to visit my sister-in-law in Florida. I'll even say the city was St. Cloud, Florida. And I went to a Catholic church. And at the end of the mass, I said something to the priest, shaking his hand about something that, it was great, but Satan thinks he's doing blah, blah, blah. And the priest looked at me and said, there's no such thing as a devil.
Ah, love
He
it.
said, he goes, that's just an ideology. And I was so dumbfounded. I had no words. I was like, if a priest can believe this, which is why I think today's conversation has been so edifying to go, look, they do exist. They do understand us. We need to understand that they're watching us. We need to obviously take captive our thoughts. It
Yeah.
starts with us in understanding that he's there and how he operates. And then we can worry about the generations later. But this is specifically pay attention because demons are watching you just as the angels are. And well, I don't know. What would you say to that then? So fill in the blank because the demons are watching you, assigned to you, do this.
Well, I think begin with the principle, and that is angels go where they're asked, the demons go where they're not not resisted.
Mm,
So you have to, like St. Paul says, the demon is like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him, solid in your faith. So we should have hope. We should have hope. we should be joyful. We should,
Hope
okay,
never
we're
disappoints.
we're surrounded. That simplifies the problem. But growing in your devotion to your guardian angel, to the Blessed Mother, tapping into all the resources that are available to us through the mystical body, these ancient devotions, learning how to fast. I want to write a book chapter for my next book. I want to call this chapter "Never Trust a Fat Exorcist," because it's very clear
He's not fasting.
in the Praenantundrum to the preface to the rite of exorcism that a priest should be fasting, and so engaging bodily prayer, fasting, almsgiving, all those ancient weapons. We fight an ancient enemy, and those ancient weapons are the best ones. And so let's tap into those, but with hope, with hope. I mean,
Yeah, because
that
hope
that
never
that
disappoints.
Christ has conquered. We're just here doing battle, but Christ is with us. Christ is watching us. The Lord God Almighty, the Lord of hosts, the God who engages in spiritual combat, the God who Moses stood and said, "Have no fear. This is a holy war. Just watch and see what the Lord does." And through that, the Lord defeats the enemies. The Lord gives us liberation, and He'll do that. We just have to be patient. We have to be patient
Amen.
and
Dan,
hopeful. Yeah.
go ahead. What were you going to say the
And,
last
and
thing?
and have hope. Let's not forget. We tend to think, oh, I just need faith. No, you need hope and charity as well.
Yep.
Right.
And again, I'll say it the third time right here is hope never disappoints. It's in the
Yeah.
Bible. It doesn't
Yep.
hurt you to hope.
It
It
doesn't
does only
disappoint.
good things. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, we do need a hope in the Lord. It's like, I hope he's going to show up today. And, your knowledge will tell you that he will show up somehow. We just may
Yeah.
not see him in a tangible way.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
So
go back and do it. Let's come back
let's
and
do
do it.
that
We'll
one
just
later.
focus
But
on curses
you've
and
written tons of books. Where can people find them? Where can they find you?
yeah, we've got the books on Tan's webpage, tanbooks.com. You can also get it, Amazon and Catholic booksellers as well. And then Jesse Romero and I are starting a new apostolate called the Holy League Institute. You can go to holyleagueinstitute.com and sign up. We're going to give classes on spirituality, formation, spiritual combat.
And all of
And
these
so,
are in the show notes, so people will be able to click
yeah,
on
yeah.
that.
So exactly. So you
And
can,
you're on a podcast each week with Jesse Romero too, aren't
yeah, we
you?
just started through the Holy League War College. We just moved from our former where we used to be the Virgin Most Powerful radio, and Jesse and I are going to do our own thing now and do more, to focus more on teaching and having classes for people. But we're also going to continue the podcast. We just had our first episode on the Epiphany blessing last week, and so we're going to continue that through the Holy League Institute. But yeah, I'll put a link in. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can sign up and get on our mailing list
Yes.
and if you got any questions or comments or whatever, I've got the info@holyleague.com. You can,
Excellent. If there's anything that anyone always asks, it's always about the devil. It's always about the demonic. We give him too much credit, but we also don't want to emasculate him because we know that he does
yeah,
have power. But these are things that you and Jesse constantly talk about, and they can see the list of books or the Q&A book that we talked about, right? It's just
mm,
so much, so much. So follow Dan in all of the links below. I know whatever your platform is, follow them there. Go listen to the shows. Get yourself armored up. We've got to fight this battle. We cannot surrender it by just hoping things go away or hoping someone else
yeah,
takes care of it. You have a responsibility to do your part in this battle. You can follow me as well. Obviously, breakfastwithbacon.com. You can follow me on all my socials, and they're all in the link below as well. And I do humbly ask, if you do have an extra dollar or an extra 1,000 or two, that you donate to my ministry in the link below. Buy me a coffee. It's really what keeps us floating here. So and I think and pretty soon you're going to get information on our newest Truth Speakers conferences in 2026. That we got some great speakers. Jesse Romero, I will tell you, is one of them. We haven't finished getting all of our speakers, so I can't say anything in front of Dan either. So don't let Dan know that I just said that. All right. I think you remember how I end my shows. We'll see.
I
And if you
think I
don't,
do.
I think you
I've
do.
been
And if
briefed.
not, it's backwards right there, right? Can you
All
read
right.
it? Is there? Okay. All right. So I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life.
Sunny side up.
He's the man.